Welcome to this webinar in our Good News in Youth Ministry series on youth-adult partnerships, empowering everyone. And I'm going to talk now about the importance of youth and adult partnerships, ways to empower both youth and adults to be spiritually healthy and mature decision makers with a special focus on boundaries. So I'm Jennica Davis-Hockett. I am your youth ministry specialist for the Pacific Western region. I work primarily with the Mountain Desert District and the Pacific Northwest District. I'm a resource for ministers, religious educators, advisors, youth leaders, and any adult who works with youth as they guide Unitarian Universalist youth in identity and faith formation. My vision is that every Unitarian Universalist youth has a dependable support network that acknowledges their inherent worth and dignity and fosters their potential as spiritual leaders, and that every Unitarian Universalist adult in that network has the wisdom, compassion, and support to meet that call. So let's start tonight with a chalice lighting. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In search for truth, may we be just. In search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. I want to set the scene for you before we begin. So last year, the theme of the Pacific Northwest District's Fall Youth Conference, which was held at Camp Sispis, this beautiful camp at the base of Mount St. Helens, the theme of that con was Carry the Flame. It was about taking con home to your congregation. And the main workshop was about creating more of a youth presence in congregations. I spoke with many youth who felt disconnected from their congregations. And as we were talking, I was thinking about the old ways of doing youth empowerment that have really been on their way out for the last 5 or 10 years. Youth empowerment is being reinvented to meet the new challenges of the 21st century. So instead of saying, oh, there's a project you want to do? Well, we'll make it happen and then we'll get out of your way. What I was hearing these youth say was that they didn't want adults to get out of the way. A new model of youth empowerment is based not on the importance of youth learning the logistical skills to run their own program, but rather on a spiritual journey. A spiritual journey in which one, youth and adults are walking together and helping youth become spiritually mature and living with integrity, seeking justice. As I witnessed at Con, many youth are already there. So I asked myself, how do I share this vision of empowerment, not just youth empowerment, but spiritual empowerment for all those who work with youth? With the good folks that I work with. So I'm going to turn my camera off now so that you can see slides a little better. There we go. So that was really the inspiration for this webinar, the realization that we are ready. We are at the turning point in youth ministry to create spiritual homes for teens in our congregations that are based on youth-adult partnerships. So the primary way that we know as human beings that we belong somewhere is that we've built lasting and meaningful relationships. And the adolescent brain knows this better than any of us. As they begin to reach out of their family of origin and create their own circles and their own meaning, many people assume, and to a large extent it's true, that youth are mostly interested in peer-to-peer friendships. And that is a large part of our role in youth ministry as adults, to co-create a safe space for those friendships to flourish. But there's a bigger reason why youth are showing up at church on Sundays. There's a bigger reason that youth are coming to full community events. Either they already are, or these youth are hoping that there will be people who inspire them, encourage them, have their backs if they make a mistake, adults who will welcome and love them even in moments when they feel unlovable. And my assumption is that you logged on to this webinar because you are ready to be that person in your congregation. youth adult partnerships are a very different animal than peer-to-peer relationships. And to mix metaphors here, if you are unfamiliar with the playing field, it can feel awkward. It can feel full of stumbles and questions. So this webinar will lay out the basic guidelines, provide some clarity to some gray areas, and give you some tools to use and some questions to think about. I'll talk about power dynamics, ministry as a tool for empowerment, and skill building opportunities across the region for youth and adults. I'll touch briefly on safe congregations policies and discuss at length everybody's favorite topic, boundaries. Adults inherently have more power than youth. Adults have more experience, education, fully developed brains. So while youth use the part of their brains that helps them easily adapt more than adults and actually weigh risks and consequences a little more level-headedly than adults, surprisingly, the empathetic and the decision-making parts of their brains are still developing. Adults have a greater level of financial independence, more rights in society, more clout in their congregations, and as Ben Parker told his nephew Peter, aka Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So I want to talk about 3 types of power right now: power over, power with, and power within. Power over, power with, and power within. There is no inherent moral quality to any of these, just times when choosing to work with one power would be more effective towards our end goal of beloved community than perhaps another one would. So first, to talk about power over, there are times when it's beneficial to use your power and authority in your youth ministry work. Taking control of a situation that is unsafe and enforcing safe congregations policies would be a beneficial use of power over. As your safe congregation policy hopefully makes clear, it's imperative that you use your authority to keep your youth safe and in right relations with the congregation. This means vetoing really bad ideas, enforcing rules, and taking charge of a situation in times of danger. This is the time to let your inner mama or your papa bear shine. But of course, you don't rule with an iron fist. It's also important to check your power in situations where it would be inappropriate or counterproductive to the spiritual growth of your youth for you to take the lead. So an inappropriate use of power over would be making decisions on the group's behalf without putting it to a vote. We believe in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and for youth that means 1 part guidance, 1 part experience, and 1 part meaningful reflection. We believe in the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process, or as in the children's version, 1 person, 1 vote. In a world where youth may feel silenced, the UU community can be a place where they can truly be heard, where we all get to experiment with the other types of power that I'm going to talk about next. And there are times when using power over others is downright abusive. So one abuse of that power would be grooming or persuading or coercing a youth to take a role, idea, or relationship against their will. So please check your safe congregations policy so that you know exactly what that looks like and you can do everything you can to prevent it. One tool for prevention is the Code of Ethics, which would be in your safe congregations policy. So when we understand and respect the inherent power dynamics of youth-adult relationships, we can begin to create power with each other. We embody this in the statement, "We can do together that which we cannot do alone." When we think about youth-adult partnerships, I imagine most of our minds are focusing on leadership, either in the congregation or the cluster or the district level. But I want to shift that focus to talk about the power of beloved community. That even when there's no common task at hand, when we're not caught up in the model of doing and we are just being together, we are partnering for the common good in all of our actions and relations. This is something that you will have to teach other adults that are not currently familiar with youth as you grow a sense of full community in your congregation or your conference. That youth can be meaningful contributors and partners in the growth of your congregation and conference, and in the growth of Unitarian Universalism if they are met with acceptance and respect. That is your new call. That in coffee hour and in council meetings, in service and service projects, youth, the stage of spiritual development for youth can be accepted and celebrated. Power with is much stronger when there is power within. And this is true for both youth and adults. Power within is the faith in your inherent worthiness and the ability to take action towards the common good. And this is why I consistently urge adults to continue a practice of spiritual discipline and grow spiritually. If we, as adults, are really grappling with our own value and self-worth, with our own ability to live within the Unitarian Universalist principles, how would we be good partners for youth? So our mission is to create a spiritual home for teens to become spiritually mature and resilient adults. To do this is emphasizing empowerment of their faith through building community, stewardship, justice seeking, and spiritual practices. Really, it's okay if youth aren't making policies, if youth aren't on the board, if youth aren't in council meetings. But it's not okay if youth cannot effectively describe Unitarian Universalism to a friend. So let's look at some scenarios. In this scenario, the youth want to invite the congregation to an evening worship. You introduce them to some helpful worship associates, facilitate brainstorm sessions with them, and show them ways of promoting the event. Is this power over, power with, or power within? I would say that this is power with. You have the connections, the experience, and the knowledge that you can share with them to help them be successful in what they want to do. Since it's an open invitation to the whole congregation, it'll be important for you to be there with them to set expectations high and to help them thus meet them. So here's another scenario. A youth confesses thoughts of suicide and you report it to the minister. Is this power over, power with, or power within? This is definitely power over. Many youth groups have a clause in their covenant that says, what's said here stays here. And that's an important part of trust, is building confidence. But in any case of danger to the youth or someone else, you as the adult in the situation have the right and the responsibility to break that confidence. Any covenant with that clause, what's said here stays here, should also have the caveat, except in cases where I think it may cause harm to you or to someone else. So here's our last scenario for this section. Two youth want to propose a service project to the caring committee for the elders in their congregation. With your support, they know how to connect to the right people, make a plan, and follow through. Is this power over, power with, or power within? This is power within, which is possible because of your ability to partner with the youth. So you still have a role in their success. You are still building them up. You are still empowering them so that they feel confident that they know how to connect to the right people, make a plan, and follow through. So how do you actually harvest the power within to create meaningful partnerships. Right now, I want to look at 3 ways: ministry to and with youth, mission, vision, and covenant, and skill building. So first, let's take a look at ministry. I think we may largely underestimate the importance of pastoral care for our youth. The minister, the caring committee, really all adults in the congregation should be concerned with the spiritual health of our youth and their ability to be present on Sundays or at conferences. If youth truly matter to their congregation and are held in love and concern, then their spiritual needs are seen and met, and they will feel empowered. Ministry of belonging or beloved community is, youth will forgive any gaps in curriculum or programming, any faults in character, any imperfections of personality if they truly feel like they belong. Feeling held in the arms of beloved community takes work. And this is where your ability to foster peer-to-peer friendships is important. So playing games, creating a safe space where youth can be authentic, this will empower them. And this is true for adults as well. Meeting their spiritual needs and a sense of belonging cannot fully reside in a group full of youth. Adults need a group of peers that they can spiritually connect with, just like youth do. And in connecting with full community, as we'll see in a minute, that's a different type of relationship than a peer-to-peer relationship. And this third part of ministry, contemplative ministry, youth group can be seen as a refuge, a solace for youth to process events and ideas that are shaping their identities and spiritual maturity, and a place to harvest that power within. I think full community events could be a similar space for harvesting that power within. A great resource for this is Mark Yaconelli's book, Growing Souls. Youth do not have to be seen as activity consumers. At the end of worships in Mountain Desert District youth cons, participants are invited to stay as long as they like in silence, which they do. They do for up to an hour. Youth really need the space to grow spiritually, and that won't happen unless we make time for it. So many congregational boards have adopted the small group ministry into their board meetings. For the first hour, they will worship together, light a chalice, share stories, remember their mission and their vision as a board. And the second hour is for business, which really seems to be more than enough time when the group is centered and mission focused. So speaking of mission, another empowerment tool is making sure that you have a strong communal vision, mission, and covenant. And I don't want you to spend the rest of the year wordsmithing these things, but I do want you to spend some time getting yourself, your staff team, your planning team, and the youth that you're working with to think about the following questions. If your planning committee or your board already has a mission, a vision, and a covenant, then make sure that you share that and contemplate its meaning with the youth that you're working with. So mission is, what are we about? Why do we meet? What does this group do? Vision is, who are we? What does our group look like? And covenant is, how do we need to act to be able to uphold the community we believe in? How do we practice our vision? When we know what we're working towards, when we know what is out of bounds, we can experiment and try new things, be authentic without fear of crossing any invisible line. And when we feel lost or confused, we can refer back to these ideas. What are we about? Who are we? How do we act? These questions can call us back to our higher self. This is an example of a covenant I particularly liked because it states the qualities of the community as well as the ways they choose to uphold it. It's both aspirational and behavioral. It suggests who we strive to be, who we want to be in the world, and how we plan to do it. So in my list of empowerment tools, the last thing that I want to talk about is skill building. Here are 3 ways that youth and adults can bring their faith into action. So the first are trainings. The Pacific Western region offers chrysalis trainings and other trainings that are open to both youth and adults. So there's a chaplain training, basic and advanced advisor trainings, leadership development, and spirituality development. There are also camps and schools, and you can bet that alumni from these camps and schools have likely gained a deep understanding of what it means to be Unitarian Universalist in the world. So if you'd like to partner with youth, alumni from these camps and schools would be a really good place, a really good pool to draw from. There's Quest Camp in the Mountain Desert District. That's a high school aged spirituality development camp, and there's Spirit Quest, which is the middle school equivalent of that in Mountain Desert District. There's Camp de Benneville Pines, and they have middle and high school and young adult camps, and that's in the Pacific Southwest District. There's Wookiee Camp, which is a high school community building camp, Western Unitarian Universalist youth, and then there's MISC, or the middle school camp, and that's in Pacific Central District. And then there's Goldmine Youth Leadership School, and that is in the Pacific Northwest District. And Russell Lockwood Leadership School is a similar school for adults only, and young adults. And that was based in the Mountain Desert District, and in 2014, it will be in the Pacific Northwest District. But don't underestimate the little stuff, too, in your congregations. So as a community, we're working on making that a spiritual home for teens, not necessarily the cons or the camps at home. So a practice and apprenticeship in the congregation is really important. Mark Iaconelli, in his book, Sustainable Youth Ministry, uses the word apprenticeship when he's talking about youth leaders. This role calls for a relationship with a specific, quote, expert or specialist adult that can partner with the youth to learn more about a specific area of interest, like worship or hospitality. Now on to the big topic, boundaries. In my mind, there are 2 types of boundaries. Those that are very cut and dry, very black and white, and then there are those boundaries that are much more fuzzy. So we'll go over the black and white boundaries first, and I'll give you a chance to brainstorm and problem solve the gray area one. So the black and white boundaries will be clearly outlined for you in your Safe Congregations policy. And if you don't know what those are, then when you log off this webinar, send your staff team an email to find out. If your congregation doesn't have policies in place, I would say stop everything and get to it to make sure that you have those. Your Safe Congregations policy is likely to have a version of the Code of Ethics and the requirement of a background check for any adults working with youth. This document states that because of the inherent, the Code of Ethics actually states that because of the inherent power structure in youth-adult relationships, it's the adults or the leader's responsibility to model good boundaries and refrain from sexual or sexualized activity with youth. It will be clear on how to handle making sure that one youth and one adult are never alone behind closed doors together. And congregations make their own policies on the lower age limit of people working with youth. And in the Pacific Western region recommends that the age limit is 25 and up for those adults who want to work directly with youth. It will fill you in on the laws regarding mandatory reporting, as each state has different requirements. And the gist, however, is that anyone working with youth is required to report any instances or intention of harm to minors. So it's really in reporting to whom is what you'll have to check with your staff team about. Another area is regulations about physical touch, and most likely it will be that it should be initiated by the youth, will be widely socially acceptable actions, be of a short duration, and only after explicit consent. And hopefully it will also have a clause about personal versus private information. So sharing personal information creates the trust and intimacy needed for bonding. This is, cocktail party information, acknowledgement of your feelings, or information that helps the youth get an idea of your personality, your hobbies, and your interests. Private information is any history of abuse or drug use, sex and relationship issues, the kind of war stories, that when I was your age, the personal, and also personal issues that you are grappling with. So like I said, make sure that you fully review your safe congregations policy when you deal with this info. So let's move on to talk about the boundaries that are a little more unclear. I've picked 3 here, but I'm sure you could uncover more. I picked pastoral care, relationships, and virtual or online communication. So first, let's look at pastoral care. Adults who work with youth go by many names: mentor, ally, advisor, teacher. We work to be trustworthy and truthful, inspirational leaders of our faith. And I bet 9 out of 10 youth group covenants, there is that phrase about confidentiality that I mentioned earlier. What's said here stays here, and except in cases where mandatory reporting is necessary. So because of our titles and the safe space that we create, at some point in your work with youth, it's likely that a youth will bring an issue that requires pastoral care. So sometimes you'll come across situations that you feel confident that you can handle on your own. And sometimes you'll come across situations that feel totally out of your league. And the importance here is for you to know the distinction between the two, and to keep in conversation with your minister and your DRE, even about the things that you feel confident about. So let's do another scenario. And this is just to give you a chance for you to measure where you are at with the distinctions of a boundary. So let's say a parent calls you and says that their youth, which is a member of the local youth group, is really struggling at school, is aggressive at home, hanging with the wrong crowd, and they just don't know what to do. They really need your listening ear, support, and advice. Would you listen attentively to the parent and offer any advice that you have, and let them know you're available to talk at any time? Tell them it's not in your job description and to have a nice day. Let the youth know about the call with his or her parent, and after a brief conversation, let the parent know that your responsibility as a volunteer or a part-time staff is to your group, and that this is outside of your scope. And in that, knowing that it's outside of your scope, then directing them to the minister for guidance? Or would you do something totally different? So because you work to be trustworthy and create a safe environment, pastoral care issues may come to you. And the boundary is that if it wasn't covered and practiced in any of your training, then you need to refer to your religious educator or minister first, and other experts and professionals upon request. So there's pastoral care, one idea, and let's move on to building relationships. So building relationships are a really important part of youth ministry. In the Pacific Western region, we use the idea of being friendly but not friends with youth. And this concept is twofold. It's advantageous as a leadership strategy, and also it's an appropriate boundary distinction. As a leader, you are accountable to the whole group, and personal friendships inhibit your accountability to the whole group. Friends are mutual confidants. They are mutually supportive. They process together, and the relationship reaches beyond where you initially met or worked together. And as an advisor or a mentor to youth, the relationship can't be one. It cannot be one of mutual support. Your role is as a mentor. The youth is not there to support you. However, being friendly is being caring and kind, respectful, humorous, and understanding. And which to someone who doesn't yet understand the boundary, this could be mistaken as the beginning of a friendship. It's up to you as the adult to make the clear distinction so that they may have healthy relationships with other adults in their lives as well. So this doesn't preclude the development of authentic relationships with youth. It's still okay to go the extra mile for a youth who is in special need of a mentor figure. In fact, knowing this boundary can strengthen the bond because both parties are fully aware of the parameters of the relationship, and that awareness is a basic element of trust. So here's another scenario. There's a poetry slam next weekend, and you know a youth in the youth group is an aspiring poet, and so are you. Would you ask if the whole group would like to make it an official YRUU evening and go from there? Go for it. It's a shared passion and will build camaraderie between the two of you. Decide to invite the youth and one of their friends so that you are following the rule of 3. Put an ad for the event on Facebook and and on the congregation's bulletin board and tell the youth that you might see them there. Or would you do something different? Because authentic relationships depend on both parties being fully aware of the parameters of the relationship. The boundary is, if it's outside the youth group or congregational life, it's outside of your relationship with the youth. So I'd say either making it an official Young Religious Unitarian Universalist or YRUU outing with the permission from parents would be the safest way to go about it. However, it's an opportunity that the whole group might not want to seize for whatever reason. And you have to be practical, and sometimes the more organic solutions can work better. So putting the ad out on Facebook and the congregational bulletin and leaving it up to chance on whom shows up might be the easiest way to make it available without pushing it. And if that's the road you go down, just make sure you stay in communication with your DRE and minister so they know what's up. So let's look at a third and last scenario of this gray area, virtual communication. So personally for me, Facebook is a primary way that I communicate with my leadership groups. Many youth don't check their check their email if it's not for school. So I have a personal account and a professional account. And I do send friend requests to youth at times on my professional account, but only if we need to share specific youth ministry related information. So 90% of the time I work in group messages or post in groups. And the nice thing about online communication is that there's always a written record of the conversation. So if it's absolutely necessary to have a one-on-one conversation, which is work related and not chaplain related, not pastoral care related, because you wouldn't be having a chaplain related conversation because you are a mentor and advisor, not a chaplain. Anyway, if you're having an online work related conversation with your youth, then you can share that record of the conversation with your supervisor if you need to. It's necessary to model to youth, depending on your relationship, and sometimes directly intervene when a youth posts something inappropriate on Facebook or online. It's important to model appropriate sharing in online formats. And I have been frank with youth before and said, you know what, that's a picture or a description of an illegal activity, and you should definitely remove that. And that's, based on the relationship that I have with those youth. So sometimes youth don't even fully comprehend just how public the internet is, and they need that model. And before we move on, if you are interested in online communication with youth, what works best, what new tools are out there, feel free to email me or call me. My information will be at the end and I can give you some good ideas. So in this last scenario of virtual communication, let's say a youth instant messages you to say hi and wants to have a conversation. Would you ask what's up and have a lengthy conversation talking about everything from school to their parents to their belief in God? Or treat it like a check-in or a coffee hour chat and then end the conversation? Or not respond? Or tell the youth about how much you're struggling with work right now and that you shouldn't be on Facebook? Or would you do something different? So because you want to model appropriate sharing with youth in online formats, the boundary is if it's initiated by the youth and it's relevant, friendly communication is just fine. It's your responsibility, however, to keep the conversation in the personal but not private realm. Publicly posted pictures require a parent and youth consent, and you should keep records of your conversation. So anything taken at a conference, any picture or quote taken from a conference, you need to make sure that we have the right forms that give parents, that have the parent consent to share those. So how can you take this good news home to your congregation, your planning team, and any youth that you work with? Power with and power within are in symbiotic relationship. Power with each other depends on cultivating and harvesting your personal spiritual power. And in partnership, in power with, our own personal power grows. So power within comes from spiritual maturity, not the ability to run a meeting or handle a budget. Another task or project or seat on a council is not going to magically create spiritual growth. What creates spiritual growth is meaningful partnerships and meaningful experiences and meaningful reflection. So co-create a clear and explicit mission, vision, and covenant, and set the boundaries which allow people to fulfill their potential as partners. When you know the horizon and the boundaries, you can orient yourself and you can help others to orient themselves in relationship. Everyone, youth and adults, need to learn and practice healthy partnerships. Every moment is a teaching moment. There's bound to be some mistakes because we're all human and this is complex. And remember that we are a covenantal community that believes in restorative justice and reconciliation. So if the covenant is broken, it's our duty to take the action necessary to restore it. So in closing, let's extinguish the chalice with this quote. Cheered by our community, blessed by our covenant, uplifted in mind and renewed in spirit, go forth with the courage and in peace to meet the days to come. Amen. So this concludes my Youth and Adult Partnerships webinar, and I hope you found something valuable in it. So please feel free to email me if you have any insights that you'd like to share or further questions at jdavis@uua.org. And I'm also available by phone at 801-201-6260. And make sure that you check out these resources. You can email me to request them if you want as well. Okay. Thank you.